Welcome to How Was I Supposed to Know That? This is a podcast designed by entrepreneurs and for entrepreneurs, where we give everybody an opportunity to share their experiences about what it's really like to be an entrepreneur. What I do as a small business attorney is that I help my clients to achieve growth and to scale while avoiding trouble. Now, sometimes trouble can be avoided, and sometimes it can't be. But whatever the case may be, it always makes for a really interesting story. And today, we've got the privilege of welcoming a seasoned entrepreneur who's been through the valleys as well as the peaks of entrepreneurship, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his experiences and share with us some of the stories that he's accumulated along the way. It's my pleasure to welcome Ryan Finley, who is the founder of Neomind Labs. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, Bernard. Honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. So, Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your business?
Oh, man. Where should I start? So I kind of fell into being a business owner. I've always said my superpower is not having the idea, but it's saying, oh, that's a good idea, and going along with it. So I started my business with a co-founder who was actually already doing it. And I was the technical co-founder. I probably wouldn't have chosen to be an entrepreneur at that point, but I liked that I could work on, whatever tech I wanted to. Fast forward a bunch of years in the future, I ended up buying him out and becoming the business owner. And man, I made a lot of mistakes at that point.
So let's back up a second. What does Neomind Labs actually do?
So today we improve and maintain existing web applications built with Ruby on Rails. We call it stewardship. At first, back in 2002, we just did anything on the web, and we weren't even sure that was going to stick around.
The web?
The web, yeah. It's like, maybe this thing will stick around for a while.
So you started out doing, I guess, were you generalists when you started out doing anything that had to do with an application on the web?
Yeah, pretty much. But we had to focus on using open source software because I went to Drexel, and my co-op job was at an insurance company using Microsoft solutions. I didn't like that. So we're focused on open source variations or alternatives.
So for those of us that know how to open a computer, and that's about where our tech knowledge ends, can you explain what open source?
Sure.
What does that mean?
So open source software is software where you're free to view and even modify the source code of the program. So like Windows, for example, is closed source software. You're not allowed to change how any of that works. You can buy it, you can download it, you can use it, and that's the end of your capabilities. But Linux is an open source operating system that's an alternative to Windows. And if you wanted to, you could go in and, tinker with your printer driver if you didn't like the way it worked, for example.
Really? Okay. So I guess it's for really tech-savvy people that are very comfortable with computers and programming, and they would want to use open source software so they can make improvements and enhancements and customize it to their preferences.
It can be, and that's how it started out, because a lot of it was for hobbyists. And back in 2002, it was kind of laughed at that it might never be, a serious tool because of the way it started. But the Chrome web browser is based on the WebKit web browser, which Apple open sourced, which they started from, I think it was called the Conqueror web browser, which was open source. And, all of that was, the Conqueror web browser was, Apple saw some potential there because of its performance capabilities, but it didn't have all the functionality that they needed. So they added that on and then contributed it back to the open source community. And then when Google made their own browser, they started from Apple's WebKit browser. Again, they saw some opportunity there. They saw some stuff they liked and some stuff that were opportunities. And now I think Chrome is the most popular web browser. So I think in a lot of ways, open source solutions have proven that they can be superior and they can be for everyone. But usually most of us aren't tinkering under the hood.
And that's where you come in. You're a tinkerer. And you said that you were, I think the term you used was you were the technical founder or the technical partner.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what was the other person? What was his role?
So he was the business guy. So he did a lot of the sales, and he actually was pretty technical too. So if I would he would sort of shield me or cover me from client requests while I figured out the hard thing, and then he would be able to re-implement the solution, over and over again. Which I think is a lot of startups have the technical co-founder sort of, if you want to call it a design pattern. I've seen a lot of people like in search of a technical co-founder. Like it seems like it's a way people like to divide the labor.
So is it normally that the business partner looks for the technical co-founder, or does the technical co-founder look for the business partner?
I've seen both. I think each person like can know their strengths and really not want anything to do with the other side of things. I think a technical co-founder may know they have a good business idea and need someone to do all this stuff that they aren't interested in or find distasteful, or a good non-technical co-founder may know they need someone to be able to implement their idea and go deep on technical Q&A with customers or investors or that sort of stuff.
So in your case, how did the business founder come across you? How did he first meet you?
We knew each other from high school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We ran into each other in a parking lot one day, and he said, we're doing web stuff and we need a programmer. Do you know anybody? And I said, oh, I do web development at an insurance company. I could do that. And, we started doing consulting.
And the rest was history.
Yeah.
Was it just the two of you at first?
There was another guy that was doing design, and our customers tended to lean more programming heavy in terms of the solutions they needed. So he eventually ended up just going out on his own.
And when you came together, so at first it was the three of you, right? If you remember, did you have any sort of legal documents like partnership agreements, operating agreements, that kind of thing?
Yeah, but we were just checking the box. So there was this company called the Company Corporation. So keep in mind, we were 21, still in college.
Okay.
So the Company Corporation would let you start a company in any state in America. And we figured Delaware is where you start a company, right? No taxes. Someday someone will buy us for $1 million, we'll have it all figured out.
Right.
So we went to thecompanycorporation.com, I think was their website. And we, went to the shopping cart, picked Delaware Corporation, LLC, 3 members or 2 members. I think it was 2. And, they had all the formation documents and the partnership agreement. What do you call the?
It may have been an operating agreement.
Operating
that's typically
agreement. Thank you.
Yeah, that's typically the governance document for an LLC.
Yes.
So it was an operating agreement.
So they gave us like a template operating agreement. We read it and we were like, yeah, sounds good to me. We signed it all, and I think it was $450, and they, we had to have a registered agent in Delaware, which they also provided for an annual fee.
A recurring annual fee, right?
Right.
Okay. Auto renewing.
Yeah, exactly.
Did anybody ever talk to you about whether or not Delaware was the right jurisdiction for you to form your company?
No, we never asked anybody, and nobody ever had offered the advice. It wasn't until many years later when I bought out my partner and had to reincorporate that I started asking questions and was told that was stupid and I should just do it in Pennsylvania because that's where I'm based.
Yes, and to be clear, I know that you're from, right, so you live in Pennsylvania, your business is in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Everything is in Pennsylvania except that your company was formed in Delaware.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we thought we were being slick.
There's a lot of advice out there, and it's hard to know what's real and what's not. But hopefully, a podcast like this gives people the real story. So
or at least the right questions to ask.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit more about that, right? So you receive this. You check the box and you get your operating agreement, and you go on about executing your business and not operating the business. And at a certain point, the third partner who does the design is getting antsy or frustrated, or what's happening that leads to his deciding to leave the company?
It's a little bit foggy because it's been so long, but I remember it was all pretty amiable. Like we were friends first, and I think even today in the technology world, there tends to be an attitude or an approach of like an abundance, not a scarcity. So, there's enough pie for everybody kind of approach. And I think he just sort of, realized that my business partner that was doing the sales his network was bringing us software projects, not design projects or projects that didn't need much design. And so I think he just took it on himself to use his network to sell his skill set. And it sort of, I think it was pretty natural.
So he approached the two of you with his decision made?
I think we approached him and, just to talk about, like, it seems like this is the way it's going. How do you feel about that? And I remember him sort of, not being surprised and being pretty okay with it.
Okay. So what happened next? How did you actually transition from that 3-person company to the 2-person company?
Now that I'm telling the story, I think we probably didn't officially create the company until after that. I think we probably didn't get our paperwork together until after that point, because that was pretty early on still, and we only had a handful of customers. So I think we probably were each, doing all of our paperwork as sole 1099, sole proprietor and no LLC.
Okay.
Until after that point, because I don't remember having to dissolve and reform the LLC or change any of the paperwork.
All right. Okay.
I still have all the paperwork in my Dropbox folder, and there's like only one copy of it. So that's how I'm coming to the conclusion that we must not have done that until afterwards.
Okay. So you think that you didn't have a separate entity formed for the 3 of you?
Right. Which I realized, like, all of this could have gone way worse. Like, we were very lucky that, we were all just kind of live and let live about it.
Yes, near misses are a part of life, right?
Yeah.
So in your case, you didn't have the company formed. You were doing work jointly among the 3 of you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the 3 of you decided that maybe things weren't going the way they wanted to, and you collectively decided to part ways. And the 2 of you decided at that point, the 2 remaining members or contractors decided to form a company.
Right.
And that's when you went to the corporations.corp or whatever.
Yeah.
That's when you went to the website and you got the stuff for the formation of the company that you didn't really read thoroughly, but you felt it checked a box.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. And we needed all that paperwork to be able to do business in the city of Philadelphia and to be able to file our taxes. And so that was the boxes we thought we were checking, and we were just blowing past all of the, potential future landmines about, buying out my business partner and that sort of stuff.
So, so can we unpack that a little bit more?
Sure.
So did there come a time when you realized that, man, my operating agreement didn't address a lot of stuff that it should have?
Fortunately, no. Because if I realized that, I think it would have been a sign that I was encountering problems. It wasn't until much later when I reincorporated and actually read the thing that I was like, oh man, I don't know what the old one said, but neither one of us, looked at it again or tried to enforce any of it. I think we were really focused on, he wanted to go do something different. I wanted to keep doing the same thing. We were trying to figure out, like, what was a fair way to divide up what we'd created.
And what did you decide to do?
So ultimately decided to basically, we didn't want to pay somebody to appraise the business. We Googled a little bit and came up with what we thought they would come up with, which was probably totally wrong. But we ended up, basically, I paid him. We were making the salaries we were making. The company was doing okay, and I ended up agreeing to pay him, like, I think all of the profit the company made for, 6 months or a year or something like that. Because it was a consulting business, and we'd heard that consulting businesses typically go for like 1x revenue or 1x EBITDA, because there's no guarantee that any of the customers will stay. And we talked through that we'd built this book of business together, but there was no guarantee that any of them would be renewing next year. We were small. It was small numbers. The cash flow was pretty low. So it ended up being, a number that was large enough that was like, well, maybe I want to walk away for that number. And ultimately decided I didn't. I liked what we built. I liked doing it. And we agreed that we both thought it was fair.
So the purchase price was all the profit for 6 months, you said?
6 months or a year, I can't remember. Minus what I needed to live, which was like, we didn't pay ourselves much.
Now, isn't profit a pretty nebulous concept? Oh, you can manipulate profit, right?
Right. We weren't very financially sophisticated at that point, and we both worked pretty closely. And we both, at the time, we weren't using QuickBooks the way you should. We were living out of like spreadsheets and checking accounts, and we met pretty regularly about what was going to us, what was going to expenses. We had pretty low overhead, and what was left over. And the leftover is what we considered profit. I found out later we owed a lot of money in taxes, so it wasn't actually profit. And I had to clean that up. That was my problem at that point. We had a shared understanding of what we meant by that at that point, and it was very unsophisticated and mostly wrong. But it's how we arrived at an agreement.
Okay. So how would you do it differently this time if you had to again?
I mean, number one, the tax liabilities should have been a part of the equation, right? But that said, I do still think the number was probably fair, so we might have still agreed to a similar number, but I think we didn't do pretty much any due diligence. We went into it sort of naive, optimistic. I didn't consider what liabilities I may have been inheriting. And, for the one that I'm talking about, taxes, there were probably a dozen that I should have been aware of and still am not. I only know the one, that I got burned by. If I had to do over, talk to a lawyer.
I'm still glad that's been recorded.
Yeah.
I agree. So how long have you been in business, Ryan?
So we started that company. We incorporated in January of 2002, but we were doing business a little before that. And I bought him out at the end of 2007, and it took me 2 years to reincorporate. So there was like 2 years in there where, again, I was operating without an LLC. Although I think I filed all the paperwork retroactively, so I don't even know what that means or does to my potential personal liability, but I'm sure you do. I seem to have escaped unscathed because I think that's far enough away that it's not a problem now.
We can certainly talk after the recording and get into those details. But the reason that I ask about your tenure of entrepreneurship is that so depending on the starting point that you choose, you've been in business for 22 years, 15 years, more than a decade, and by some calculations, 2 decades and change.
Mm-hmm.
Over that time period, I'm sure that you've seen differences in terms of your level of success, in terms of how happy you are with your business, and in terms of your revenue. Now, looking back over that time period, has it been linear or has it been more of a roller coaster ride?
Definitely a roller coaster, and I would say, to borrow a word from the computer nerds, like kind of a step function. Like, I was at a level for a while that I felt sort of stuck at. And, through a group that we're both a part of, Entrepreneurs Organization Accelerator, sort of was able to identify my bottlenecks and get sort of to the next level. But it wasn't like a straight line. It was step and then jump, step. And sometimes, down a step. When, the first year that I was in that accelerator program, my revenue dropped 50% from the day that I started to 1 year later. And it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back sometimes.
So for those that don't know, maybe you can explain a little bit about what the accelerator program is.
Sure. So, I found it after I did the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, which is another great program that entrepreneurs should look into. It's in most major cities. But I think the EO Accelerator program is like a great logical next step, because the 10,000 Small Businesses program is only about a quarter and it ends. And then you sort of have this taste for working with other entrepreneurs on your business instead of in your business. And EO's Accelerator program is not free like 10,000 Small Businesses, but it's a very reasonable cost for the value. You get a coach, you get a group of peers that are not in competitive businesses, and you get quarterly learning days where you work on people, strategy, execution, and cash. And it's been 6 years. I still go to all 4 learning days every year, because every year it lands differently. The things that you're working on are more or less the same, but the person you are and the business that you run has changed a lot in the last 12 months. So it always lands a little bit differently, and I always get something different out of it. And it's really, helped me one step at a time identify like how I'm holding my business back.
Right. Now, membership in the accelerator program for EO has certain criteria.
Right.
And part of that criteria has to do with the annual revenue.
Right.
EOA participants have to have revenue of at least $250,000, but not more than $1 million.
Right.
And one of the goals of the program is to help the accelerator participants to graduate, quote unquote, meaning to increase the revenue to hit that $1 million mark.
Right.
So when you began as an accelerator, you were in that range, that $250,000 to $1 million range.
Right.
And I'm fascinated. You said that in your first year, your revenue dropped by 50%.
Right.
Can you take me through that and what happened during that first year? And
Sure. Yeah.
Why was there a drop?
So that year, I actually thought that I had a chance to graduate, and because the EO accelerator was just starting, and when you graduate from the accelerator, you can join EO proper, which I wanted to do until I learned that there was an accelerator, and I said, oh, that'll be great too. It's cheaper. So I was having a great year, best year ever, because we had this. We improve and maintain other people's software. That's our focus. It was our focus at that point. But there was this project that came along with a big budget that was not that. And we got distracted by it. And I said yes. I felt like I had to after talking to this person for so long. And around September of that year, I had 2 full-time employees at that point. And I guess they basically got tired of being neglected all year because I was focusing on this distraction. So at the same time I found out that project was ending, I found out that both of my employees were leaving within a week of each other. Wow. So at that point it was 2017. So in the entire 15-year history of Neomind, that was the first week that it was ever just me. Like even when I bought out my partner, we had some subcontractors that, persisted through that. So fortunately I was already interviewing when I got all that news in like a 2-week period. And I picked the best person and said, you're hired. But it was a couple weeks before he started. So it was the first week I had where it was just me. And we finished out the year, still best year ever. But then the next year, our revenue was half. It went from like 750 to like 320 or something like that. And the silver lining of that was we were fine. Like the business is that scalable, and I know that. We were able to cut overhead, and I still made roughly what I needed to make, and it was okay. It was painful to step backwards, I guess, from an ego perspective and from a professional perspective, to have to do all these jobs that I thought I didn't have to do anymore. Right. But good to know that I still can, and that my business is flexible and scalable, and that I'm flexible. And the other silver lining is my first EO accelerator coach was like a culture guy, and that was his favorite tool to use to build everything. And I realized that we were really weak there, and it was really easy for me to reset our culture with nobody to push back against it. So starting with one person who was totally on board was a lot easier than with, I think, the somewhat cynical people that had left. That's not true. Most of those people were okay, but I think the well had been poisoned, and I think I personally struggled with that sort of conflict, and it was just a lot easier for me to not even have to just be able to. I always talk about. Have you ever seen the movie The Princess Bride?
Sure, of course. Absolutely.
So there's a scene where he says like, "Well, we'll fire the whole crew, and then I'll start calling you the Dread Pirate Roberts, and then we'll hire a new crew, and then they'll all think that you're the Dread Pirate Roberts." Right. So it was like that moment for me where I was like, well, I'm just going to pretend that our culture has always been this way, and then we'll start hiring new people into it, and then they'll just believe that it's how we've always been. So it's like that kind of opportunity.
And nobody thought that was inconceivable?
Nobody thought it was inconceivable.
Okay, good. So you dropped your revenue 50%. So you joined this accelerator program for the purpose of scaling your business.
Right.
Right. And the first thing that happens is that your business drops by 50%.
Right.
And you're hearing about things like culture through your accountability group coach and through this program that you're involved in. Do you think that it was culture that was the reason that those two key employees left, or was it something different?
I think that was part of it. I think about this a lot, and I think a lot of businesses, I think people and businesses, we get by on our strengths and we use our strengths to cover our weaknesses. And I think something I try to do when I can is to set aside my strengths sometimes and work on my weaknesses. And culture was definitely one of my weaknesses. But I think I probably could have covered for that weakness in other ways. I didn't. But I think I probably could have retained those people without culture. But the company that I've built and that I wanted to build and that I'm happy I have is one that has culture as a strength. But I think that not every successful company cares about culture. And I don't think they have to, but I think they would be better if they did. But you have to pick your battles, and there are so many things you could work on instead. I guess you have to decide what's important in your company.
Is culture important to your company?
Very much, yeah.
How would you describe the culture?
I aspire to, you should ask my employees if I've succeeded, a flexible environment. It's forgiving. Something I borrowed from the healthcare world is you should blame systems and not people, because it encourages people to speak up when things aren't right. And I guess along with the flexibility, I want there to be a good work-life balance, which some people say there's no such thing, that you have to oscillate between. I think I'm okay with that idea as long as you're not oscillating too far. Like, you shouldn't be oscillating between 40 and 60 hours. You should be oscillating between, 25 and 40, if possible.
And as you, again, you've been doing this for between 15 and 20 something years. Mm-hmm. As you look back over what you've accomplished, and particularly as you look back over your time in the accelerator program and in going from 750 in annual revenue down to 325, and then having to claw your way back up, you eventually graduated from the accelerator program. You eventually hit that $1 million threshold, and you've kept going ever since.
Mm-hmm. Well, forward and backwards.
Oh, okay. So let me not make any assumptions then, right?
Yeah.
So what did you do to initially go forward? How did you reach that milestone that in 15 years you hadn't previously reached?
So I think there were a couple of things. I think probably the biggest thing is going to sound the simplest, but someone in my EO group, my accelerator group, and a therapist I was talking to helped me realize that anxiety was a bigger problem than I realized for me, and that every time I would get to the 750-ish mark, the wheels would fall off. Like 3 times it happened. That the third one was the one I just told you about. That was the worst. And I think it was just because I got overwhelmed and then dropped all the balls I was trying to juggle. So just being able to name and tame, I think the therapists say, really helped. But I think the other thing, maybe that was 2/3, and the other 1/3 was I know that I'm not great at following through on things that aren't fun, and things that I'm not good at tend to be less fun. So I got a sales coach. And that, I think those two things together, the sales coach helped me do the things I needed to do to get busier, and the naming and taming the anxiety helped me to get busier and get help and continue to get busier.
So what do you do about the anxiety? Because you can't just wish it away, right?
No, I mean, I think, meditation, working out, making sure you're sleeping enough. I pay attention to my caffeine intake sometimes, like all these things that go on a cycle. But I think knowing that, mental health's really important. It's health. And I think a lot of people are talking about that now, and I think that's great. I think just being aware that it's just anxiety really helps you to put it in perspective and realize that, like, oh, I'm feeling anxious right now. I shouldn't make any permanent decisions or any big decisions until I've had time to calm down.
Right.
And just being aware of your own mental state, I think, is a huge tool. Just knowing that it's temporary and knowing that you have tools in your toolbox that can help you get to a place where you can make a decision you're comfortable with, instead of, I think I've seen other people, and I know I've been in a position where I feel overwhelmed and I feel like I've been putting off too many decisions. And so I just shut down, you know? So I think just recognizing what's happening is like more than half the battle.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I think you probably just helped somebody. I do.
Hopefully.
I think you do. I think you did. I mean, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed this conversation and just hearing about your experience. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the statistics. Most businesses don't last 1 year.
Yeah.
There's a much larger group of businesses that end after 3 years and after 5 years, and you let past all of those hurdles. Mm-hmm. Very few companies actually make that hit that milestone of $1 million in annual revenue. You've done that. You've gone past that. You've had a tremendous journey. But I just appreciate the honesty and the rawness that you've brought to this conversation and sharing what some of those setbacks have looked like. Thanks. Looking back over all of it, what do you have any other words that you'd want to share to other young Ryan Finleys who are maybe technical folks who are thinking about getting into entrepreneurship?
Don't do it. I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm kind of not kidding. I've said seriously that I wouldn't wish entrepreneurship on my worst enemy, but I know there are a lot of us that are ruined for regular jobs, and there are a lot of people who would choose it again and again. So, talk to other people. I think one of the things that EO taught me was I felt like I had to invent every solution to every problem. And then I always found out later that it was not the ideal solution. And I think if you can build your network of other entrepreneurs, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think a lot of us have a tendency to view our business as a snowflake. Like, it's a unique, no one's ever done it before. But I mean, one of the things I learned in 10,000 Small Businesses is, like, you have more in common with a funeral director or a jewelry maker or somebody who runs a small cable company, as a software developer, as a lawyer, than you might realize. The problems are mostly the same. More the same than they're not. So I think if you can look for solutions to your problems that other people you respect and trust have tried and have worked, you can agonize over your decisions a lot less and not suffer as much from analysis paralysis as I have.
Well said.
Thanks.
So, Ryan, if people want to find out more about Neomind Labs, people want to hire you, people want to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
We're at neomindlabs.com. We have a contact form. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Ryan Finley. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much. I've enjoyed this conversation. I hope you have as well. Thanks so much for listening in. This has been How Was I Supposed to Know That? My name is Bernard Williams, and I wish you well.